What if I told you that one of football's most iconic kings, a poet with a football at his feet, was born from a story of war rebellion and a house carved from a literal cave? This isn't just the story of a player. It's the legend of a man who lived by his own rules and changed English football forever. Stick with us, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because you're not going to want to miss a second of this. Our story begins not on a pitch, but in the embers of the Second World War. It starts with a man, a fighter, who fled the iron grip of General Franco's Spain, his body scarred, his liver damaged in the fight for freedom. He found refuge in France, and there his daughter would one day meet the son of an Italian immigrant. This wasn't just any meeting. The young man's family lived a life as rugged and unconventional as the one their future son would lead. They resided in a cave, a hollow in the earth near Marseille, that had once been a Nazi outlook post. From this extraordinary union, this blend of defiance and resilience, a second son was born. A little boy named Eric Cantona. Growing up in that countryside cave house, you get the sense that Eric was destined to be different. Football wasn't just a game for him. It was an extension of his fiery spirit. He began playing for a local club, SO Cayolet. His father, a former goalkeeper himself, encouraged his son to follow in his footsteps to guard the net. But Eric's talent was a restless force. It couldn't be contained in the 6-yard box. He pushed forward his creativity, his audacity demanding a bigger stage. His talent was so raw, so undeniable, that he was soon scouted by Auxerre and brought into their youth team. But for a spirit like Cantona's, the youth team was never going to be a long-term home. After just a handful of matches, his brilliance was too obvious to ignore, and he was fast-tracked into the first team. He played 7 matches in his first 2 seasons. A young man finding his feet before his career, like so many young Frenchmen, was put on hold. It was time for his mandatory military service. When he returned, it was with a renewed fire. He was loaned out to the 2nd Division side, FC Martigues, a chance to find his rhythm again. And find it he did. By 1986, he wasn't just a prospect anymore. He was a major force for Auxerre. His performances were so commanding that at just 20 years old, he earned his first call-up to the French national team. It should have been the start of a glorious international career. But with Cantona, the brilliant light of his talent always danced with the dark shadow of his temper. It wouldn't last. A training ground altercation with his own teammate, the goalkeeper Bruno Martini, exploded. A flash of anger, a punch thrown, and Martini was left with a black eye. The Federation was furious. Cantona was banned from the national team. The very next year, trouble found him again. A dangerous, reckless tackle on Nantes' Michel Derzakarian saw him slapped with a 2-month suspension. Yet even in the midst of controversy, his genius would shine through. That summer, he played in the Under-21 European Championships. In the semi-finals against England, he was simply breathtaking, scoring a magnificent hat trick. It was a performance that announced him on the international stage, a glimpse of the legend he could become. That notoriety, that blend of beautiful football and bad boy reputation, earned him a record-breaking transfer to Marseille for €3.3 million. But Marseille, his hometown club, would not be a peaceful homecoming. He remained a loose cannon. In one infamous moment after being substituted, he couldn't contain his rage. He kicked the ball into the crowd and in a fit of pique tore the shirt from his own back. The club, unsure how to handle this volatile genius, loaned him out first to Bordeaux and then to Montpellier. It was there that one of his most notorious incidents occurred. During a dressing room argument, he furiously threw his boots, striking his teammate Jean-Claude Gintini in the face. It seemed like the end of the line. But then something incredible happened. His teammates, led by the charismatic Carlos Valderrama, and the respected Laurent Blanc rallied around him. They went to the board and begged them not to suspend him. They saw what others couldn't always see, past the rage a winner. Their faith was rewarded. Cantona's incredible form propelled Montpellier to a stunning victory in the French Cup. His performances were so good, so influential, that Marseille had no choice but to take him back. What do you think was going through his head in those early years? Was it the pressure, the untamable passion of a born rebel? Or was it something deeper? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. His final season at Marseille was a whirlwind of instability. The club churned through coaches, even the legendary Franz Beckenbauer took the helm for a while. But the final coach simply could not handle Cantona's personality. Despite his crucial contributions to their league title, the club decided to sell him to Nîmes. And at Nîmes, his anger didn't just simmer, it boiled over completely. During a match, frustrated with a decision, he did the unthinkable. He threw the ball directly at the referee. A disciplinary hearing was called. He was handed a 1-month suspension. But Cantona wasn't finished. As he stood before the committee, he looked each member in the eye and one by one called them an idiot. The suspension was immediately doubled. For Cantona, this was the ultimate betrayal. Enraged, feeling misunderstood and persecuted, he made a shocking announcement. At just 25 years old, Eric Cantona was retiring from football. Witnessing such a colossal talent on the verge of throwing it all away, many reached out. Michel Platini, a French footballing god, tried to pull strings, attempting to get him a trial first at Sheffield Wednesday, then at Liverpool. But it was Gérard Houllier, his psychoanalyst, who finally broke through. He convinced Eric that his future wasn't in France, a country he felt had turned its back on him. He needed a fresh start, a new stage for his art. He needed to move to England. And so, in the winter transfer window of 1992, Eric Cantona signed for Leeds United. He arrived in Leeds to find a team of underdogs, a squad with no real superstars, yet somehow miraculously fighting for the First Division title. Cantona must have seen a reflection of himself in their defiant spirit. He seemed to find a strange sense of peace. For the rest of that season, the trouble seemed to melt away. On the pitch, he was magnificent. He was the missing piece, the spark of unpredictable genius that Howard Wilkinson's gritty, organized side desperately needed. He unlocked defenses, created chances out of nothing, and with the roar of Elland Road behind him, he helped drive the recently promoted side to clinch the last-ever English Football League title in the penultimate match of the season. His journey from outcast to champion was complete, or so it seemed. The next chapter is even more unbelievable. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss how he became a true king. The following season started with a bang. Leeds faced Liverpool in the Charity Shield. Despite missing several of their key players, Leeds triumphed with Cantona putting on a masterclass. He became the first player since 1957 to score a hat-trick in the competition, and one of a select few to ever score one at the hallowed Wembley Stadium. Then, as the brand-new Premier League era began, Leeds looked unstoppable. They demolished Tottenham 5-0, with Cantona, of course, scoring the new competition's very first hat-trick. In the Champions League, however, their journey was a dramatic, chaotic affair. They faced Stuttgart in the second round and were thumped 3-0 in the first leg. In the return leg at Elland Road, they mounted a heroic comeback, winning 4-1. Heartbreak. Stuttgart were through on away goals. But the story wasn't over. UEFA soon discovered that Stuttgart had fielded 4 foreign players, one more than the tournament rules allowed. The result was overturned and a 3-0 win was awarded to Leeds. The problem, the aggregate score was now a 3-3 tie. A special one-off playoff match was set up at a neutral venue, the legendary Camp Nou in Barcelona. In a tense, nervy encounter, Leeds United won 2-1. Through much of this drama, however, Cantona was struggling with an injury. He was unable to help his team on the pitch, and as Leeds' form began to dip in the league, the old tensions began to resurface. Cantona was never a man who dealt well with adversity. A rift formed between him and the manager, Howard Wilkinson. He was eventually dropped from the team, and inevitably he requested a transfer. Meanwhile, over the Pennines, Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United were in desperate need of a spark. They were languishing in 8th place in the league, their attack looking blunt and devoid of creativity. Ferguson needed a striker, but more than that, he needed a catalyst, a maverick. In one of the most transformative transfers in football history, Eric Cantona moved to Manchester United for a shockingly low fee of just £1.2 million. He made his debut for the club in a friendly in Lisbon, a match to celebrate the 50th birthday of the great Eusebio. Then he breezed into the starting 11 at Old Trafford. The effect was instantaneous and electrifying. He didn't just play, he conducted. With the collar of his shirt turned up, he was the swaggering, arrogant genius United had been crying out for. He turned the team's form around, completely creating chances left and right with an almost telepathic understanding of the game. His only misstep came in a match against his former club Leeds, where he was seen spitting at a fan. But by the end of the season, the league table told the story. Manchester United were champions of England for the first time in 26 long years. And Cantona had become the first player in history to win consecutive top-flight titles with 2 different clubs. The next season, he was simply on another level. He seemed to have found his home, his kingdom. He won the PFA Player of the Year award, finished 3rd in the Ballon d'Or, voting behind only Roberto Baggio and Dennis Bergkamp, and led Manchester United to another Premier League title, finishing as the team's top scorer in all competitions with a magnificent 26 goals. He was untouchable, a footballing deity. The 1994-95 season should have been remembered for a titanic title race between Manchester United and the upstart free-spending Blackburn Rovers. Instead, it will forever be defined by one moment, one flash of madness that would overshadow everything. In a tense match against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, Cantona, frustrated by the close attention of defender Richard Shaw, kicked out and was immediately sent off. As he walked towards the tunnel head down, a fan named Matthew Simmons raced down 11 rows of seats to hurl abuse at him. "Go back to France, you French bastard!" he screamed. Something inside Cantona snapped. In a shocking, electrifying moment of violence, he launched himself over the advertising hoardings feet first and delivered a flying kung fu kick into the fan's chest before punching him several times. It's one of the most bizarre and iconic moments in football history. If you know someone who needs to hear the full story behind the legend, share this video with them. And tell me which other football rebel's story should we uncover next. That moment was on the front page of every newspaper. The backlash was immense. People called for him to be banned from football for life, even deported. He was sentenced to 120 hours of community service, banned by the FA for a staggering 8 months, and stripped of the captain's armband for the French national team. He would never play for his country again. In his first press conference after the incident, the world's media gathered expecting an apology, an explanation. Instead, Cantona sat down, took a sip of water, and calmly, cryptically said, "When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea." He then stood up, said, "Thank you very much," and left the room, leaving everyone completely baffled. Those words, that moment of pure, enigmatic theater, would never be forgotten. In the chaotic aftermath, Cantona was ready to leave England for good. But Sir Alex Ferguson, a master of man management, flew to Paris to meet with him. He convinced his star player to stay to face the storm and come back stronger. When he finally returned from his ban, he struggled to find his rhythm. So many months without competitive football had taken their toll. By the winter, Manchester United were a distant 10 points behind Kevin Keegan's swashbuckling Newcastle United. But then, something clicked. Cantona and the entire team stepped up. They went on an incredible 10-match unbeaten run, with Cantona the returning king scoring in 6 consecutive games. The pressure mounted on Newcastle and Manchester United, with relentless momentum, finally secured the title on the very last day of the season. And Cantona, despite his long ban, once again finished as the club's top scorer. The following season, he was officially named captain of Manchester United. He led by example, producing one of his most iconic moments, with a sublime delicate chip and an even more famous celebration against Sunderland, a slow 360-degree turn soaking in the adoration of the Old Trafford faithful. By the end of the season, they had won the league once again. And then, just as he was at the absolute pinnacle of his powers, Eric Cantona did the unthinkable. At the shockingly young age of 30, he announced his retirement from football. "I want to retire while I'm at the top," he explained simply. Cantona remains one of the most enigmatic, fascinating figures the sport has ever seen. We all seem to have a love-hate relationship with him. As entertaining as his antics were, they clearly cost him the opportunity to solidify his place among the absolute pantheon of greats. I even question myself whether he truly deserved a place in this series. At first sight, a striker who only managed 187 career goals, around the same as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and never won a major international trophy, might not seem deserving of a place on a list of legends. But with Cantona, the numbers only tell a tiny fraction of the story. You always get the sense that we never even saw him at the peak of his powers, and more importantly, he contributed so much more to his teams than just goals. And that was my reasoning for putting l'enfant terrible on this list. Getting into our ranking system, when it comes to his finishing, it's a very hard thing to rate. He was so elegant, so stylish, but not the most prolific goal scorer, and although I do believe we should give style points, they shouldn't be the main focus. Regardless, he was fantastic at set pieces, and his physical presence made him a constant threat in the air. So for finishing, he gets a 9 out of 10. Then, his positioning. Perhaps what stopped him from being a truly prolific scorer was that he wasn't an out-and-out target man. He loved to drop deep to orchestrate, to find space between the lines. I've always wondered if he would have been even better playing a little further back. For positioning, it's a 7 out of 10. For speed and physicality, he was a truly imposing figure. He had this incredible physical presence, but maintained such a graceful, almost delicate stance on the ball. It was a unique combination that has to warrant a good score, despite him not being the fastest player. An 8 out of 10. Now his first touch and ball control. For me, this was the best part of his game. It was a true joy to watch. The way the ball seemed to stick to his feet, the way he could pluck it out of the air. It was art. He could not get anything less than a perfect 10 out of 10. Then his mentality. I think this is the toughest thing I've had to judge so far in this series. On one hand, he was a complete loose cannon who always seemed to make the worst possible decision in the heat of the moment. But on the other, he was an incredibly imposing figure, a leader whose arrogance and self-belief seemed to single-handedly push his teams onto success. Regardless, I think his career was more negatively impacted by his temperament than positively, so he can only get a 4 out of 10 now for his legacy. First, consistency. He always performed both in France and in England, but he lacked that defining impact on the international stage, so he can only get a 7 out of 10. Secondly, flair. At the time, he was one of the most satisfying players in the world to watch. He was so subtle, so graceful, with incredible volleys and all sorts of spectacular strikes in his locker. For flair, it's another undeniable 10 out of 10. Then his trophy cabinet. Not a single international trophy, not even a UEFA Cup. No Ballon d'Or. But winning 7 league titles in 9 years is something truly incredible, and it warrants him a 3 out of 10. In terms of longevity, his career was a short, brilliant flame. Only 14 seasons in total, and only 5 at a truly top team, having retired at just 30 years old. He can only get a 3 out of 10. Finally, the icon factor. This is where he truly shines. He is by far one of the most iconic players we have ever seen. To this day, kids on the playground still pop their collars up and say, "Look at me, I'm Cantona." I doubt that will ever change. He has to get a 9 out of 10. This totals out to 70 out of 100, which makes him the second lowest rated player ever in this series. And I know many of you are already hovering over that dislike button, but please realize that this carries no disrespect towards him. He was a magnificent figure in the sport, but his personality undeniably stopped him from taking that final step up into the realm of the all-time greats. And that is reflected across his career. As much as I admire him as a player, it wouldn't be fair to overlook his flaws. And also keep in mind that if a player even makes it into this series, it means they are one of the greatest of all time, so the rankings have to be tough. And that's where this incredible football story concludes. What a journey, right? I'm so eager to hear your thoughts. What moment stood out to you the most? Did this player's struggle resonate with you? Please share all your opinions, your favorite moments, and any questions you have in the comments below. I truly love reading them and building this amazing football community with all of you.